Hey, welcome to Geeky Faucets. I'm Amy Dale.
And I'm Christine Lucas-Savage.
And this is episode 62.
So I got the idea for this episode. I was in the library just looking for books for my kids, and I was in, of course, the junior, juvenile, whatever section, and there was a book by George R.R. Martin. And he, as you know, is the guy who came up with Game of Thrones. Game of Thrones. And I'm like, kids book, Game of Thrones.
How does that work?
I'm like, I'm not real sure how I feel about this. It was called Ice Dragon. I was a little afraid to read it. I didn't end up reading it, but I checked it out of the library, I'll be honest, and I actually renewed it. And I read like the first page, but I was scared. I'm like, well, how many people are they going to kill off in this book? Because dude kills everybody. And there's a dragon and all this stuff. And I don't know, so... yeah, so then I got to thinking, I'm like, well, you know, that's kind of cool. It might be like the gateway into like kids being, you know, into really awesome like sci-fi fantasy books. Mm-hmm. And so I looked around too, and also Neil Gaiman, I found this book. It's called Fortunately the Milk. And I read most of that one, and it was beautiful, beautiful, beautiful drawings. And like just, well, my kind of drawings. They're kind of a little weird, a little off the wall and cartoony, but they're amazing. And
so did he do the illustrations or did someone else?
Oh, I don't know.
Okay.
I want to say
the milk? Is that what it's
Fortunately the milk.
Okay.
And it's the whole premise. I got about halfway through, and then I got a trashy book and started reading that instead. But yeah. So I got about halfway through, and it's this guy who goes to buy milk, and he's just on this crazy, I don't even know, like adventure, and it was so random, and it was so cool. I think I'm actually going to get it from the library again and read it to my kids after we finish this next Harry Potter book, because Harry Potter just gets darker from here on out, and I'm not sure my kids are quite ready.
Which book are you on?
3.
Yeah, it definitely.
So it just gets darker from here on out. So I might get that one again and try it, because I actually was enjoying it. I'm not really sure why I stopped. Well, I guess trashy books kind of sometimes
Trump,
and sometimes Pinterest, I'll be honest. But anyways, so it got me thinking, I'm like, what other kind of books are out there that famous authors have written that have kid books? And it turns out there are a lot of older, like, classic book writers, like Margaret Atwood. She wrote The Handmaid's Tale. I read that way back in, like, middle school, and she actually wrote a kid's book. I have a whole list. BuzzFeed, y'all, telling you, their lists are really happy and awesome. Sometimes they're not true. And they might be made up, but
sometimes they're actually not accurate.
They say facts, but maybe sometimes they're not. But I don't really care because they make me happy. Anyway, so she wrote one called Up in the Tree. It's about these kids who try to live in a tree. So it'd be kind of interesting to see how a classic author takes, you know, because The Handmaid's Tale is a little dark and deep. You know, it was a pretty good book. I actually really liked it, and you know, going into a kid's book.
Yeah.
So it's, and Langston Hughes wrote a kid's book, the first book of Jazz, it's called. Ian Fleming, the guy who did James Bond, I did not know this. He wrote Chitty Chitty Bang Bang.
I really hate that movie.
But I don't mind it. It's fine. But I'm just saying, like, I had no idea that James Bond was the one that wrote The Flying Car. I mean, that's pretty cool.
It is cool. I didn't know that either. Maybe the book's better. I should try the book.
I don't know. I've never read the book. Upton Sinclair, the guy who wrote The Jungle, wrote one called The Gnomemobile.
Oh my gosh, that's a movie. And I actually like that movie.
Really?
Yeah.
That's funny. Well, it's based on a book. So it's a kid's movie then?
Yeah, it's a Disney movie.
It's pretty cool. E.E. Cummings. Isn't he the
poet guy?
The poet guy. Yeah, he wrote some fairy tales, and Oscar Wilde. T.S. Eliot.
Oh, he's another poet guy.
Yeah, he wrote one.
Isn't he a poet?
I think so. He wrote The Picture of Dorian Gray. It sounds familiar. Dorian Gray sounds familiar. T.S. Eliot. He wrote Old Possum's Book of Practical Cats.
Well, that might have been one of the T.S. Eliot things was what they based the musical Cats on.
Really? I wonder if that's it.
Yeah.
That'd be kind of interesting to find out. And James Joyce, we were forced to read one of his books in high school. I'm pretty sure they shouldn't make you read those books. But he has a kid's book, The Cat and the Devil. Kind of interesting. This book is about a mayor who makes a deal with the devil. I don't know. But anyway, so there's all kinds of, like, people, I mean, I would have never have known that they would have written kids' books. I was looking for more modern writers that wrote kids' books, but I had a hard time finding some.
I know John Grisham just did a series.
Did he?
And James Patterson. Yeah, John Grisham did a series called something, I can't remember the kid's name, Theodore Boone or something like that. Anyway, he's like a little kid, sort of, I think it's a little kid detective-ish thing, I think.
See, that's pretty cool.
And then also James Patterson, who wrote like all those bazillions of
I've
books.
written a few of them.
You've written a few? That's awesome.
I've read
I did
a
not
few
know
of them.
that.
I'm a ghostwriter, and my name is James Patterson.
So no, he has a series called Maximum Ride, which is about...
Oh, yes, I borrowed that book from you.
Yeah, it's about like kids who have wings, and it's kind of X-Men-ish. Like it's got some...
It looks really cool.
Yeah, it's really good. So he's written this whole series, and then there's some classic-y stuff like, and Terry Pratchett, who's a great fantasy writer. He has the whole...
He has a whole world.
Discworld and
Discworld,
stuff.
yes.
Yeah, he wrote a book called The Amazing Maurice and His Educated Rodents, which is at our library. And it's really clever and funny.
That does sound funny.
He's really witty. He's a very witty writer. Neil Gaiman also has The Graveyard Book and Coraline.
Coraline was a movie.
Was a movie as well. And Coraline is a great book, but it's definitely not for little kids. But like middle school age kids, it's really good. And then Dave Barry and Ridley Pearson, which Dave Barry is, I believe, a comic columnist. He's a funny
Dude's
guy.
funny, yeah.
They wrote a series called Peter and the Starcatchers, which is really good. And there's like 5 or 6 of the books. And it's like a prequel to Peter Pan.
Oh, that's
really,
cool.
They're really, really good. Yeah.
So I bet these books are more entertaining than reading, like, I don't know, massive amounts of princess books to your kids before bed. Because I don't know about you, but like, sometimes you just get tired of reading Disney books and My Little Pony books. Like, don't get me wrong, I love My Little Pony with all my heart. I know you don't, but like sometimes I just want something that's more fun to read, and you know, it's pretty cool to find.
I almost never read those Disney books. Well, my kids are a bit older now, but I almost never read those to my kids, and I always suggest something else. But one of the things we're going through right now with most of my kids is the Shel Silverstein books. So Where the Sidewalk Ends,
Yes.
the poetry. And then we're reading Light On in the Attic right now, and we have, I think, 2 more of them. And those are so much fun to read with your kids.
My daughter,
Oh,
my
word,
daughter
those are
got
so fun.
one of those from the library, a Shel Silverstein book, and every night she'd be like, "Mom, listen to this poem." And she
Did you know that he wrote the lyrics to A Boy Named Sue?
I don't even know
The
what
Johnny
that
Cash
is.
song? Oh. Well, there's a famous Johnny Cash song some of you may know called A Boy Named Sue. And
I
Shel
don't have
Silverstein
really
actually wrote the lyrics, which
good-
makes sense when you know who he is and you know the song. You're like, oh, of course he wrote it. But I didn't know that until after I know the song for a long time. And I was
Kinda
like,
random.
oh. Yeah. Anyway, so he, and then there's a series, it's actually sort of written for kids, but I read it as an adult, which is the Redwall series by Brian Jakes.
I actually have that on my Kindle. It was free for like a couple of weeks or something like that at some point, and
Yeah.
I need to read that one to them too, because I
There's
bet they'd like that.
Bazillion of them. Like there are so many of them. He was very prolific. They're very descriptive. So I think some littler kids struggle with getting past all the descriptiveness.
I'm not a little kid, and sometimes I struggle with that.
Me also.
I'm like, can you
Yeah.
not
I'm
tell
like,
me
yeah,
what this
just-
box looks like
Just
for
tell me
10
it was a
pages?
sunset. I don't need to know all the colors. I can
But
get
it was yellow and pink,
Yeah.
and it was 3 inches off the horizon, and then 2 minutes later, it was 4.
I know. So I kind of get a little bit done with the description, but actually they're really, really, the stories in those books are really, really good. Also, Madeline L'Engle, she writes kids and adults. Well, she did. And she's, so A Wrinkle in Time is a classic, which I haven't read to my kids yet, but it will be fun. And, of course, The Hobbit.
Yeah, my husband. Oh no, he's not reading The Hobbit. He's reading C.S. Lewis.
Oh,
The
that's another good
Lion, the Witch, and
set.
the Wardrobe.
He writes
Yes.
for adults, and that is a great series. And also, well, this is more of an adult series, but a lot of people don't know about the Space Trilogy, and I love that one, so you should check that one out. Okay, yeah, and also, May 3rd, you should mark your calendars as a subject change. May 3rd is Free Comic Book Day. So go find your local comic book store wherever you live, or sometimes libraries, check your local libraries, because our library up here does that.
They do?
Mhm.
Okay.
They do. They give away free comics on Free Comic Book Day.
Dude, and they sometimes have SpongeBob, I'm just saying.
They do.
I heart SpongeBob.
I have SpongeBob on my
So
floor.
they're not like crappy comics. It's actually like good
I
comics.
had a Firefly one year.
A Firefly, dude.
It's also on my. We did a comic book floor in my geek room, and
We can't wait to show. I can't wait to show
it's
you.
gonna be really cool.
Kind of
We're working on
amazing,
making
so.
a studio down there, and that's yeah. So a lot of those comics are on my floor, which is pretty cool. And they also have at some of the comic book stores, they'll have cosplayers and special guests, and it's just really fun way to get to know your local comic book store and get free
And to
comics.
get your kids to read, because my kids love reading comic books. That's sometimes, I mean, that was like their gateway. They would always go to the graphic novel section in the library.
Yes.
And I'm like, yes, go read
Yes.
as many comic books as you want. But then they start to want to read novels. I'm like, hey, whatever makes you happy. Like, as long as your face is in a book, I don't care what you're doing.
Totally. And then the other thing we want to promote, of course, is Denver Comic Con. And that is June 13th through 15th. Some of the guests include Lou Ferrigno, the original Hulk.
Pretty sweet.
Adam West, the original Batman. Bruce Campbell.
Who's amazing.
'Kay.
Like the master,
know, Bruce Campbell,
B-movie actor ever in the whole entire planet. Yes.
Carl Urban, who I love
Me too.
so much. He's so great. And then they just announced recently that Stephen Amell, who is the star of the show on the CW, was it CW? Arrow?
Yeah.
He's a star. He's going to be there on Saturday. So if you're a fan of Arrow, you might want to sign up for Denver Comic Con. If you do not live in the Colorado area, you can always fly to Denver. Also, if you don't live in the Colorado area and you don't want to fly to Denver, you should look for your local cons because there's usually
loads of them.
they're happening all over the country.
Yes.
So just look in your Google and find out where
Look
there's
in your Google.
Look in your Google and find out where what's going to be that's going to be local to you, and go and experience geek culture up close because it's so
pretty cool.
much fun.
Yeah, it's really fun. We like it.
Yeah, we love going to those. So thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you next time.